I'm Chris Bussing. Welcome to my channel. It's committed to helping more people create lives of freedom and impact through success in tech sales and the pursuit of self-development. Man, did I score big when I landed our guest today, JR Butler, pun intended, because he used to play hockey at an elite level and transitioned into tech sales and then became a chief revenue officer in the tech space. And now he's launched Shift Group, which is turning elite athletes and veterans into elite sellers. We're going to dig into JR's journey into tech sales, his lessons learned on succeeding in this career path, and you're going to come away motivated and inspired to reach your potential in tech sales and in life. If you guys enjoy the conversation, which I know I will, make sure to share this video with more people who could benefit from the message. And with that, JR, thanks for being here. It's time to get dialed in.
Let's go, Chris.
Let's go.
Right there, baby. We're getting dialed in, baby.
Yeah. And so I noticed that's an expression of yours, and I've heard it before from some of my other friends, and I love that. And I don't want to jump to conclusions on thinking I know what you mean. So tell the audience, what does that mean to get dialed in?
Well, so the reason it came up was when I first started the company, I'd always get asked by a lot of people, how come you're focusing on athletes and veterans? And my answer was always, because I don't have to explain to an athlete or a veteran what it means to be dialed in, right? Now, that being said, which I think most people are like, okay, that makes sense. But then everyone kind of takes it a step. What does it mean to be dialed in? For me, it's pretty simple. Being dialed in means having a vision and a purpose of like what you want to achieve, having a plan to achieve it, being prepared for the obstacles that are inevitably going to happen, and like having a bigger reason why you're doing all of it, because then the obstacles are easy, right? So that applies to everything. It applies to, hitting the phones and making cold calls. It applies to closing a deal. It applies to working out. It applies to being a good father and a good husband. So like being dialed in, to me, it's more of a mindset thing than anything else. And it's a huge part of our program is like scientifically helping our candidates get dialed in, because what happens when you spend your life in uniform and then you wake up one day and you're not in uniform anymore, you lose all that. You lose the goals you had. You lose the plan that you had. You lose the confidence, right, that you had in uniform, as whether you were a service member or an athlete. And because you lose that confidence, you have a lot of fears. And those are the types of obstacles that you have to be prepared for. Things get scary. And then you also lose your why, right? Like service members have a massive why. They go out and fight for our country and our freedom. And athletes have a massive why too. So that's what we mean when we say we help our candidates get dialed in. We do all the tactical training in the world, and it's awesome. And kids come out of our program like really like tactically prepared to be successful in terms of the skills and the concepts that we teach. But the reason that our candidates are successful is because we get their mindset dialed in. That's what we mean by being dialed in.
So would you say that having a strong why and vision is actually way more important than knowing the tactics?
100%, dude. Yes, 100%. I know a lot of people that know how to write cold emails or, do discovery and qualification. But if you're not driven, like, especially in sales is so fucking hard. Sorry.
Yeah, we can cuss. We speak French on here. And I spent 3 years in Boston when I cut my teeth in Oracle. And my buddy, we were at Top of the Hub. You ever go over there in the Prudential Tower? Yeah. My best friend from childhood, Tyler Blasian, came to visit. And I was literally cussing like a sailor. And there was a family nearby. He's like, bro, watch out. Like Boston rubbed off on me, man. So.
Well, my dad was a high school hockey coach. So like people are always like, man, like, you swear a lot, JR. I'm like, dude, I got raised by wolves in a high school hockey locker room. So like, deal with it. So like, I think because it's so hard, if you don't have a bigger why, it's really easy to just say, you know what, this is too hard. Like I'm gonna go do something else that's easier. So I think that's the most critical part of success in anything, especially sales.
So when I think about my personal why, you might have heard it in my intro, right? using tech sales as a vehicle to create a life of freedom and impact. I think of being financially free and being able to do what you want and invest in, trips and live a great lifestyle. When I was at Oracle, I got promoted from SDR to inside sales rep, and I hit 120K my first year, and I was buying my whole team coffee, which was a little irresponsible, but it was a small taste of freedom and impact. We can give to charities. Our skill sets can be applied to make a bigger difference for ourselves and others. That's a little bit of my why, and I know it's super high level, but can you help us understand how to think about defining a why that's actually powerful?
Yeah. I think if we weren't on a live show, Chris, and I was like working with you, like in our program, I would dig in on that. Why? So you don't get to your why until like you answer like really like 3 to 5 whys, right? So like everything you just said, I agree with. But like, I'll just use myself as an example. Yeah. There's a reason that stuff that you talked about is important to me. And for me, I didn't grow up with a lot. My parents were great providers. Like we didn't want for anything. Don't get it twisted. Like I didn't grow up like, poor by any means. But when I was 15 years old, because of hockey, I got an opportunity to go away to a boarding school, and I went away, and I didn't pay. Like I got financial aid, and it's the 8th most expensive boarding school in the entire world. Right? These are the most wealthy. It's called Cushing Academy. These are the most wealthy people in the world, not just in the United States, in the world, that send their kids there. And, I'm a Central Mass kid. My dad was a high school hockey coach, sold used auto parts. My mother at the time was a hairdresser. And I spent like my teenage years from like 15 to like 19 years old. And then I went to Holy Cross, which is another incredibly expensive school with very well-to-do legacy people. I'm a first generation college graduate. So like I spent like a large portion of my teens and early 20s feeling like I was less than, because I didn't grow up the same way these people did. I couldn't say yes to the spring break trip unless I, won in poker. Like I took money from the rich kids in poker. I would charge kids to clean their rooms at Cushing so that I could go on. So I
wow, what a resourceful, enterprising guy at an early age.
But like people are like, okay, like, I was financially driven in my 20s when I got out of college. I graduated with a ton of debt, and that's so my why is the same as yours, but my reason, that's what you have to get to really understand your why, is like, you have to understand the reason why it's your why. Like, I know that seems like a little bit, like that's pretty deep right there, but like if you can get there and you can look in the mirror, you can do that introspection. It's a powerful, powerful tool that you can use when you make 150 calls and nobody picks up, or one person picks up and they shit all over you and hang up in your face, right? Like, it's easy for me to come back the next day with conviction and belief if I know exactly why I'm making another 150 calls that day deep down in my bones. So that's the type of stuff, the type of conversations that we're having with these folks that are just getting out of uniform. It's really powerful.
It is powerful stuff. I just got chills because you mentioned I have a good why, right? And I thought it through, but there's something deeper behind it where I could get even more connected, where every cold call I make, which really cold calling sucks, and it's unnatural. You're going to get like rejected. Customers are going to be annoyed, but that why provides the motivation and the emotional connection to keep going anyways, like you said, and make those 150 dials. Because otherwise, if you don't have a strong why the hell would you make like 100+ cold calls a day?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly right.
So I look at, what's behind you, and I can't help but ask, nobody cares, work harder. That gets me fired up, but what does that mean to you?
It means nobody cares. This is my whole like stance as a human being. And like our brand is like very much like anti-entitlement and like go out and earn it, right? Like the excuse department is closed. So my whole thing is like, you have to participate in your own success. Nobody is sitting there waiting to help you. Like, you have to go get it, right? So I put it right here, so I see it all day, every day, and it's a reminder to me, like, nobody's coming to save me. Like, if I want to get what I want to get, I got to go get it. Full stop. Nobody's going to get it for me. And I think that's like, we've lost it a little bit in our culture the last few years. And I think it's starting to come back a little bit more. And, I think at the end of the day, if everybody believed this truly, like, we would live in a pretty fucking awesome place, in my opinion.
Yeah, no more victims, people making it happen, as my dad always said. Oh my gosh, my dad showed up, make it happen. You're right on, JR.
Yep.
My dad is a legend, and it's funny. I hope you didn't hear me about cussing in Boston, but and Kyle Tremblay, if I'm saying that right, said really connect with the ex-athlete angle. Will there be an opportunity for Q&A? Yes, of course. So Kyle, type up some questions and we can weave it in. Of course, I have my own line of questioning. So JR, thanks to you, I watched Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals when I never follow hockey. You had an incredible post on LinkedIn that got me inspired, and I ended up at Luster Pearl with my puppy watching the game, having a good time. And Florida won. That's my home state. Can you tell us what you love about hockey? Because that's kind of that's part of your backstory.
Yeah, I mean, that is such a hard question, dude. Like, I was born into hockey, right? Like, I mentioned my father coached high school hockey for 28 years. He's in the Massachusetts Hockey Hall of Fame. I could literally skate. I could skate before I could walk. Wow. Now, all that said, right, the reason I love the game is, like, the nature of it is that you can't be a halfway hockey player. Like, the dedication, the time commitment, the financial commitment of the entire family is, like, so high compared to other sports and that's one thing that it creates, right? Like, I did a paper. I was a sociology major at Holy Cross, and I wrote a paper about, I played hockey for 23 years, played on a lot of teams with a lot of kids. Across 23 years, there was only one family in 23 years that was divorced, which is, like, when you think about the divorce rate in the United States is over 50%, right? So it's this sport where you don't just compete as an individual. Number one, you compete, your whole family is part of the.
Wow, I love this.
Yeah, it's so like a real life example, Chris. My little brother played in the NHL, right? He played several years, and in the collective bargaining agreement in the NHL for the NHLPA, the team that signs a player to their first NHL game is obligated to fly the entire family to that game and put the entire family up in a hotel. And it sounds like it's just like players negotiating and getting more money, but really the message I get from that is a deep understanding of the hockey community, that in order for somebody to be successful in a game like ice hockey, it takes an entire family, like, organization and a community to make that happen, right? So there's that piece of it. The amount of driving you do, the early mornings, because, like, there's not that many rinks out there, right? So, like, it's not like I can just go out and, like, I can go outside here in my office and kick around a soccer ball. I can't do that in hockey. I got to find a rink. I got to get on the ice, and there's limited ice. So that drives a lot of travel and financial commitment from the family. The second, so that's, like, more personal side of it. But the actual game of hockey is a true 100% true team game. There are superstars in ice hockey. You had the fortunate opportunity to see Connor McDavid. He didn't have his best game, but he's one of the best players ever. However, as you can see, Connor McDavid cannot win the Stanley Cup by himself, because if he could, he would have, right? He needed his entire team to step up. There's 6 guys on the ice every single shift. There's 23 guys on the bench. If one guy makes a mistake and has a bad game, it costs the entire team whether they win or lose. And that creates a certain culture and a certain type of person that really always knows what it means to put the team first, because that's what you do your entire youth experience, high school experience, and college experience, and professional experience, right? So it just creates this camaraderie and this connection and this accountability to the people around you that you just don't see that in other sports. I'd say some of the closer things, maybe football, but even football has superstars, and the quarterback and the receiver and running back are going to get more shine. That doesn't happen in hockey. Like it truly is, in my opinion, the purest form of a full team sport, and that's why I love hockey. And I love the speed, the physicality, like the actual game itself is just unbelievable.
Yeah, I had to ask you about it. Football is a sport that I love. Not that I really played it, but I'm a big time Green Bay Packers fan. And to your point, one person can cost the whole team. And I think about that devastating loss against the Seahawks where Russell Wilson was crying at the end of the game because one of our players dropped the onside kick. And my dad's on here, and we always joke, hey, I had to go to the hospital. It was such a bad loss. But we were big time Packer fans. And it's just an example of we're all counting on each other in a sports setting. So I have two more hockey questions that are going to start to transition into, tech sales and the parallels. So we all learned the lesson from Wayne Gretzky. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. That is a great life lesson. So what are some of the life lessons, and honestly, like maybe transferable lessons that apply to sales that you've learned from playing hockey?
So many. I don't even know where to start. I think the biggest lesson I learned as a hockey player was you get out what you put in, or the way my dad would put it is, if you plant tomatoes, you get tomatoes, right? So like it's your effort equals your results. And like kind of similar to this right here, it's like there's nobody else to blame. Like I distinctly remember, this is the best lesson I ever had in my life, and it's really hard story to tell. But I was 11 years old. I tried out for this select team, the Minuteman Flames. It was when there was a house league, and then there was selects. Now it's pretty watered down, but back then it was you either played for one or two teams. The best kids played for the selects. The more average kids, like I wasn't a natural talent like my brother was, played for the house league. And I tried out for the Flames, and I got cut. And I was 11 years old, dude. I was like in 5th grade, right? I come home, I'm crying. I'm like, mother MFing the coach, this, that. My mom loves me unconditionally. She's like, you're right, they're wrong. Like,
yeah, that sounds like my mom.
yeah. My dad comes home, he sits down on the couch, he looks at me, and I'm wailing. He's like, JR, I have a question for you. He's like, how many pucks did you shoot every day this summer? And I'm sniffling. Well, I had baseball and, my friends, and I start making excuses, right? I start making excuses of why I didn't have a straight answer. I couldn't look him in the eye and say I shot 300 pucks every day. He's like, how much did you do sprints? How much did you roll? It starts going down the list of things. How much did you stick handle in the driveway? Like all the things that I know I should have done that I didn't do. And then he asked me, he's like, do you think you did the work to deserve to make that team? And I had to tell him, like, at 11 years old, I knew the answer. I'm like, no, I didn't. He's like, so stop fucking crying and work harder this season and next summer, and you'll make the team, right? So like, that's a very broad lesson that like I think applies to life forever, right? Like, and that's the type. That's not a hockey thing, by the way. Like, that's why I love youth sports. The other thing I learned is like losing is learning, right? Like I lost a lot more hockey games than I won. And we always looked at it like, okay, we lost. Like, what are we going to do different next game? It was like, be pissed, be sad. Now let's look at the game tape. Let's figure out like, what did we do wrong? And let's get better next game. So I think that learning from losses, that resiliency to come back the next day with the same conviction and vigor that you had the day before, even when you lose, that is so applicable in life. But it's incredibly applicable in sales. That's like the biggest, most important lesson I think that anybody can learn. And I think every kid should play youth sports because of that lesson.
Oh, such a good point. I heard a story through someone that I like in my network that mentioned an SDR that was on their team at a tech company that had a lot of potential but failed because when they got rejected over and over, they couldn't make more calls. It derailed them so much, like psychologically, that they couldn't just keep bouncing back and staying focused. That's kind of what you're saying, right? Your ability to bounce back and come at it strong with conviction, even after a bad day or a bad call.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. It's one of the things that, I think every interviewer should ask any entry level person, whether it's sales or anything else, is tell me a story when you failed and how you reacted to it. Because I meet a lot of kids from really good academic institutions, not so much athletes, but non-athletes. And, you got the kid who's sitting in the front of the class, has never gotten below an A+, like is in every club. Like this person has never been through adversity in their entire life. That should scare the shit out of you if you're going to go hire them into your life, into your company and into your business, because adversity is part of the package, man. Like you got to be able to fight through adversity. And if you can't, that's pretty scary.
That's such a good insight for the audience a lot of my audience wants to break into tech sales. And for those that have experienced failure and bounce back, that's going to be very encouraging to know that whip out one of those stories and tell it with conviction. And for those that might not have experienced as much adversity, you might want to like put yourself in a situation where you could experience that. Now, that's going to come up in interviews for sure, especially for the SDR role. But I've even seen it for me interviewing for like founding AE roles at companies.
Oh, yeah.
I was interviewing with an investor and they're like, tell me about it. It sounds like you've had a lot of success. When have you failed? And I'm like, oh boy, I've failed so much. This is going to be good. Now, do you have any thoughts though, for an entry level person on how to frame their failure story other than just being honest and real?
Yeah, they have to, it's got to be like a hero story, right? Like this is how I failed and this is how I was better after.
Yep.
Right? Like that's the frame job you have to put in. And you got to pick a story where that's true, because by the way, like especially when I was younger, and I'm sure you can relate to this, Chris, I failed, and instead of like an explanation, I had an excuse. And there's a difference. There's a difference between an explanation and an excuse, right? So like I could explain why I lost, and then I could close the gap of that explanation, or I could make an excuse and never own it and never get better from it. So you've got to frame that question. You've got to frame around a hero story where it made you stronger, better, faster because you lost, because you failed.
Great distinction on the difference between an explanation and an excuse, because I notice people in the sales realm, especially an entry-level role, that are making excuses like, oh, my manager sucks, or we don't have good inbound leads. And like, those are excuses. Your job is to not make excuses. And maybe there's a reason why things are a little difficult, but just make it happen, as we talked about. So I do see a question from Kyle, but I want to ask like one or two more questions and then we'll segue to that. You say that everything matters. I think I saw that on the Shift Group site, which, by the way, guys, is linked in the description of the video. I encourage you to check it out. And that's something that's always stuck in my head too. I love that concept. What does that mean to you, though? And it seems like a concept that applies to all of life, you know?
Yeah. It's I think in relation to sales, you have a lot of strong opinions now, and this is being viewed on LinkedIn, so it's a good platform for this question, because you see a lot of people saying like, oh, cold email is the way, or cold calling is dead, or the only way to get meetings is through the channel or through networking, or doing events or doing, and it's like, no, like you got to do everything. Everything matters. Like, you can't just rely on one channel. Everything matters. You have to try everything. You have to get good at everything. Yes, you have to test it. And like, by the way, if you try a channel and you try it well, which is the most important part, like you actually execute and it doesn't work, then it's okay to say, this doesn't work for us because you're different than the company next to you and the company next to them. And then I also think just generally, like it's all about the details, man. Like that's what we mean by that, is you got to pay attention to the details. Life is in the details. And, you look at people that are excellent, right? And obviously I'm going to use sports analogies. I'm going to talk about Tom Brady. I'm going to talk about Kobe Bryant. I'm going to talk about Michael Jordan. I'm going to talk about Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick left nothing to chance. That's why he won so many Super Bowls. Speaking of Seattle, right? We all know the Malcolm Butler interception, right? On the goal line. They never should have ran a pass play, but the Patriots ran that play in practice every single week the entire season, and it never happened in a game until they were in the Super Bowl. You got to watch. There's a documentary about it, and Malcolm Butler read the play because they did it every single day in practice for the entire season. So like you think like, oh, Malcolm Butler got lucky and stepped into the passing lane. No, Malcolm Butler didn't get lucky. Bill Belichick was paying attention and made sure his team was prepared for everything because everything matters. Like that's a great example of what that life is in the details and success is in the details.
Amen. And it feels like you took a page out of this book, Fanatical Prospecting by Jeb Blunt, who I had on the channel. Actually, is one of my last guests that I had a week or two ago. Cool. And you literally took pages out of his book of like diversifying the way you prospect across channels, just like you diversify your investments in different asset classes, and actually executing well. And on a company by company basis, you might find that certain channels do work better than others, but you figure that out. So everything matters. I love that message. Now, one more question before we get to Kyle Tremblay's question. You lost your first love. And we're not talking about romantic love. We're talking about your love, hockey. You had to transition away from hockey, right? And then you found a new love, it seems like, right? Can you talk about that experience of transitioning from hockey eventually to tech sales and how tech sales turned out to be actually a really great fit for you as a path?
Yeah, I think I didn't deal with it well, Chris. Like now looking back, I'm thankful that I didn't deal with it well because I wouldn't have started Shift Group if it was a smooth transition for me. I love how you described it, like losing my first love, because that's what it is. It is the same thing as losing a loved one. You go through the same steps of grief that I did when I've lost friends, I've lost grandparents, I've lost, uncles. Like the same thing happens. It's like shock, right? Like I wake up one day and I'm not a hockey player. And it's just like, and then it's like denial. It's like, no, I'm going to play again. Like, I still am probably a little bit in that. Like I've seen the Stanley Cup a few times and I've never touched it because like there's a thing in hockey, like if you touch the Stanley Cup, you can never win it. So like I've been to my buddies' Stanley Cup parties and they're like, hey, do you want to hold the cup? I'm like, no, I'm good. Like I just take my picture and I'll stand like next to it like 5 feet away. So there's like that you go through the denial, then you get mad, then you start like kind of bargaining, like, you kind of hold on to hope a little bit. And then that's when the depression hits. Yeah. And for me, the depression was a long phase. It was probably 4 or 5 years. And, I grew up Irish Catholic. We didn't talk about our problems a lot. So the way I dealt with it was drugs and alcohol. And I went to a really dark place. And then ultimately I got pulled out of it because I found sales. And to answer the second part of your question, what about sales all of a sudden brought me back to life and got me into my acceptance phase and like my kind of new season of my life? It was like, okay, here's a career where you're on a team. Okay. You're on a team. There's a scoreboard, and the harder you work and the better you get at like these specific skills, the more money you're going to make. And by the way, like that should sound really familiar to you if you're an athlete, because that's the exact same thing as sports. Like it's a meritocracy, right? Nobody cares, work harder. If you are going to put in the time and you're going to develop the skills to execute when the pressure is on, then you're going to get paid according to it. And as soon as I realized that and I figured that out, I was like, immediately I'm like, all right, I don't need to be a hockey player. I want to make more money doing this, which obviously I have. I've gotten the chance to go do that. And I wish somebody explained it to me that way right away. Like right when I was 24 years old and hockey was over, instead of me going through life angry and resentful for a few years and struggling with booze and drugs, because if someone had framed sales to me this way, I would have been like, oh, this is awesome. Like I'm still an athlete. I'm a sales athlete now. That's all. That's the only difference. So that's what we do, right? Like we try to position it and help them understand like, hey, nothing's changed. Nothing's changed. Yes, you're not going to, take 500 free throws in the gym, but you're going to make 500 cold calls and you're going to get better on every single cold call. You're not going to shoot pucks in your driveway. You're going to practice account research and reading 10Ks and doing all this other stuff. But it's the same idea. You're working on skills. You're getting better. You got pressure to perform. You're going to lose a bunch and you're going to learn from those losses. You're going to get better. And the better you get, the more money you're going to make. So that, to me, that was the transition I went through. And that we're basically trying to take my transition and like accelerate it by like from like 10 years to like, basically like 10 days, essentially.
Wow.
Is what we're trying to do.
Talk about a accelerated path right there. I love to hear the heart behind what you're doing. You're helping the former you take the God-given talent that you have and they have and put it to great use to go down a path where you can make a lot of money and feel really fulfilled. So well put on the parallels between sports and being a professional seller. Now, I will go to Kyle's question now. And of course, I'm going to have as many questions as I can fit in the remaining 28 minutes that we have. So Kyle is entering tech sales for the first time from an accounting background and semi-pro rugby. Do you have anything in terms of red flags when you're looking for a company to apply to in tech sales?
Great question, Kyle. That's a good start. And Kyle, by the way, go to shiftgroup.io. We'll help you, buddy. It's free.
Okay, that's amazing, by the way, that it's free. That's amazing. Wow. Yeah. Okay. Let's go. It's linked in the description of the video, Kyle.
So the way I think about this is don't get wrapped around the axle about comp. Like, obviously, you don't want to take well below market value, but like 5 to 10K doesn't matter in the long run. Your working situation. Everybody wants to work remote. Personally, I don't think you should work remote in your first job. I think you need to get in the office and learn how to be a human being and be a professional and get around other people and learn through osmosis. But everybody's life situation is different. If you got kids, you got commitments, I get it. The things that matter in the company that you go to, the number one most important thing is that the person you're going to work for is someone you admire that you can learn from. That's number one thing. Like, big company, small company, security software, HR, I don't care. None of that matters in your first job. What matters is you work for somebody that you believe you can learn from and that you admire and that you want, like, you look up to and want to become, because that is going to drive you to get better every single day. And that's going to be somebody you look up to and you listen to. The second thing, in my opinion, is not like necessarily like a structured onboarding. I don't think, I wouldn't do well in a structured onboarding. Like, Oracle's a great example. They have an awesome onboarding program and an awesome program. I would have failed miserably at Oracle, and I probably would have ended up, being a firefighter, which is nothing wrong with that. But
that's a pretty cool role, actually.
The culture having, believe me, half my family's firefighters.
Okay.
My whole thing is a culture of training and development. And that doesn't mean it needs to be structured 5 weeks on board before you get on the phone. It means that every time you're having an interaction with somebody in your team, your leader and your peers, it's a culture of feedback and development. Like, hey, I heard you say this. Like, here's what I think about that. Maybe you should try this next time. Like, those are the types of conversations that you need to be around for those first 18 to 24 months in your career, right? So that's and it's really going to be like almost kind of a coaching culture. Like, and those are the questions you should be asking is like, talk to me a little bit about how you develop your people. Can you give me an example of somebody you've coached up recently and how you approached it? And you got to figure out if their coaching approach is one that is going to resonate with you and work for you, right? Like, I'm a because of the way I grew up, like I need to be yelled at to change, especially when I was younger. And so I needed a leader that was going to be like, dude, what the F are you doing, man? Like you're messing up. You need to do it this way and like really give it to me. And you got to find the leader that's going to coach you the way you need to be coached to get better. So like, I know I didn't answer the question specifically for red flags, but if they can't answer that question, that's a red flag. Like if they can't tell you how they develop somebody, if they can't give you an example of somebody that's been on their team that was promoted, massive red flag. That's the type of leader you want to avoid. If a leader is the type of person that's going to try to hold you on their team in that lower level role as long as they can, get the hell out of that interview process right away, right? So those are especially for athletes and veterans, which it sounds like Kyle's an athlete. Like Kyle needs to find a culture where coaching is a key part of it, and he needs to find a leader that he admires and he feels like he can learn from. Everything else aside, if he can find those two things, he's going to do really well. And that first job is really about the foundation. You're not going to spend 20 years there. This isn't the 80s anymore. So find somewhere where you're going to be a different person than you are today in 2 years, and you're going to be just fine for the rest of your career.
What a great answer. Because I also firmly believe the number one factor is your manager, and that colors your experience. I spent 3 years at Google Cloud, and eventually I left partly because I had friction with my manager, and I had a lot of managers there because Google's very dynamic and changing a lot. And so you could be at what might seem like such a great company with such a great culture, but you have a bad manager situation and everything goes south. So I love that you shared like probably the most important red flag to look out for. I like what you're saying about tough love. My dad, I'm using my dad's words. He just threw tough love in the comments because when I was a kid, I'd pitch like almost a perfect baseball game and he wouldn't tell me how great I was. He'd say good job, but like what I could have improved. And honestly, I was pissed for sure, but I appreciate that he did that. So Austin Cummings says, good advice about prioritizing, seeking out a mentor regardless of the specific role. And we're actually getting in some more questions. Kyle says, Roger that, JR, cheers. JR, if you don't mind, I was going to throw in one more thought, and I want your feedback on it in terms of red flags. You might have heard of RepView, but I guess if you look at a company beyond your manager, which is most important, if only a small percentage of reps are hitting their numbers, don't you think that's also something to be mindful of? Or like, what do you think about that?
Nope. I don't. I'm excellent. I'm an excellent salesperson. So you tell me 20% are hitting their number. I'm not asking you. My question as an elite salesperson would never be how many reps are hitting quota. If you told me 100% of reps are hitting quota, I would be like, see ya, I'm out of here. Like this place is too easy. I want to know.
I like that.
I want to know how much does your top sales rep make? Because that's how much I'm going to make more than them, right? So it depends on the confidence you have in yourself, I guess is the answer to that question. Because like, in my opinion, if a place is hard to hit the number, there could be a couple things going on. You're absolutely right. Like they could not have product market fit. The numbers could be too high. And that's stuff you got to figure out in the interview process. But you could also be stepping into a place where I worked at a company, Chris, for a long time where we didn't have high quota achievement, but our top 10 sales reps, W2 to $1 million consistently for all 7 years I was there. These are 26 and 27-year-old kids that are making more money than my brother was making at the time playing in the NHL. So like, yes, the average and the lower people maybe didn't hit quota, but if you were an above average salesperson and an above average human, which I believe that I am, then you made a shit ton of money. That's the question that I would be looking for if I were a leader to be asked. I get the part about like, you want to check the red flags, the product market fit, are the quotas unachievable? But if there's a large enough group that it's hitting quota and a large enough group that's blowing quota out, then you can decide if you think you're going to be average, and then you got to go find a company where you can be like, I can be average and still make money here. That's okay. But if you have belief and conviction that you're excellent, then you got to go find a company where that excellence is going to get paid accordingly. That's my 2 cents on RepView and that whole culture around like transparency and quota achievement. I don't believe in it, candidly.
What a killer mentality. That ultimately belief will determine your success. And you see the challenge as an opportunity to be a big fish in the pond. And who
Totally.
cares? You're basically saying, who cares if people are like, a lot of people are hitting their numbers. In fact, if everyone's hitting their numbers, I don't even want to be there because that's not interesting to me. What a
Right.
mindset. I love that you challenged me there. Super great. And I looked at your background, and you started out at it looks like a reseller. You went to Turbonomic, where my buddy Rob, who was at Oracle, went over there. I wonder, I forget his last name, but he played baseball at UMass Amherst, and he was a killer. Okay,
Yeah.
I'll think about his last name. Did you ever know a guy named Rob?
100%. I know who you're talking about. He's a stud. I don't
Yes.
remember his last name either.
Isn't
Yeah.
that cool? Like, oh my gosh, I'll figure it out later and message you. But you're Turbonomic, and then you were a CRO, right? Chief Revenue Officer, leading teams and even building AWS like ecosystem partnerships, which resonates with me. And the last company was Pillar, right?
Yep.
Okay. So I just wanted to dig into your experience, try and extract some lessons. I'm keeping an eye on the clock. This is such valuable time. We have like 18 minutes. And then Cameron, I'll get to your question. Well, you know what I'll do real quick is I'll get to Cameron's question. Audience comes first. If any market segments have historically been ignored by SaaS, would a new product in that niche be a good opportunity? So, I mean, I guess maybe Cameron's alluding to like traditional industries being disrupted by SaaS technology. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, I think the next like 15 years are going to be the decade and a half of vertical software. It's a massive opportunity. We have a customer that's disrupting the towing industry. We have a customer that's disrupting the independent pharmacy industry. These are like pharmacy, like 90% of pharmacies. So like Walgreens and CVS own like a big chunk of the market, but a much bigger chunk of the market is pharmacy owners that own like 1 to 4 pharmacies in like a regional area, like a couple town area. And like those types of scrap yards, we have a scrapyard software company. So if you think about it, like the owner of a lot of these owners are baby boomers, and they're going to be passing their businesses down to their Gen X and their millennials, children, right? And these businesses haven't been digitized yet. They're largely manual. They're doing a lot of stuff on paperwork still. So there's all these verticalized softwares that are popping up to go disrupt pretty big markets. Like the towing industry is like a $3 billion market, which is crazy to me. I think I had a big chunk of that when I lived in South Boston. I used to get towed every Monday because I used to have Sunday fun days.
Hey, I got to say, JR, I remember one time I was living in Somerville in Davis Square, and I saw the tow guy going to my car, and I caught him. They were notorious. Nice. I said, sir, excuse me, and he didn't give me a ticket. But they're tough over there. Anyways.
Nice. Yeah, so the short answer is yes, it's an awesome opportunity. Now, that being said, to the point we made earlier, it's hard. It's hard to go sell software to somebody who's never bought software. But if you can get that skill in one vertical, you can go and apply it. So you can go and help a towing company grow their vertical software, get bought by private equity or acquired by like Salesforce.com, and then you can go do it at 10 other companies. So like, I think that skill of being able to sell software to people that have never bought software before is going to be a skill that's going to be really critical over the next 15 to 20 years. So Cam, if you got an opportunity, go for it, dude.
JR, such a good answer, such good perspective, especially you saying how I think you said boomers are going to pass on the business to millennials and Gen Xers who are more open to digitizing. And if you get in there I think the term's a nascent market, it's really early. Yep. And if you're with a market leader, that is just a wave to ride. And by the way, I saw it's Rob O'Neill. I don't know if you know that name.
I know Rob. Yeah. Rob was a rock star.
And hey, another guy that was a former athlete, he pitched at UMass Amherst. What a beast. And oh man. So, okay. I wanted to ask just about your career experience real quick. I'm actually at a cloud reseller, like a billing broker. You could buy Google Cloud AWS through us. We're a professional services company. Is that the type of company you started out with? When I looked on your profile, you said reseller. Like, what was that first company?
Yeah, so we sold, this is pre-cloud days, right? So This is like, I rode the virtualization wave. So when I got into the business, companies were still running a single application on a single physical server. A lot of companies didn't have storage area networks yet. So I started my career as an infrastructure data center reseller. So we sold like EMC, Dell, HP, Cisco, all the gear that goes in a physical data center. And then we sold VMware, which basically virtualized the entire app, virtual machine layer, and allowed you to go from running one application on a single physical server to like 25, which was kind of the advent of cloud. Like that's really what cloud is. Candidly, it's just someone else's data center, right? Like, like
you're renting it.
Yeah, exactly. You're renting it. It's more of a financial model than a technical model, like at the end of the day. So that's where I started my career, which I think, like, by the way, was an awesome place to start your sales career, because we didn't sell a product. Like, we sold 150 products. We sold all the services that went along with it and the implementation. So I couldn't go into a customer pitching anything. I didn't have anything to pitch. I had to learn, like, what's going on? What's going on in your business? Here's what I've done research on. Here's what I think is going on. Here's where I think we can help you. But, ask them questions to get them talking about, was it backup? Was it storage? Was it servers? Was it security? Like, I had to go in and listen and learn. And then I position products and expertise around those things. So I'm very, very grateful. And it was a complete accident. I tripped and fell into it. But I can't recommend that world of sales enough in terms of the resale. We work with a ton of amazing resellers, some of the biggest in the world, Ahead and Presidio, and a lot of AWS partners. It's such a great career, as you're realizing now, Chris. It's awesome.
So what I'm taking away is that it was really a blessing to be at a company where you sold so many types of products that you had to really be a trusted advisor and a consultant who listened first and sought to understand, and only then could you formulate a relevant solution. And I bet, is there anything else you would add to, like, the skill set you developed by being in such a consultative sale early on?
Relationship building, man. Like, I went to a couple of my customers' weddings. Like, I actually got to know these people, and I cared about them, and I cared about their career, and they cared about me, and they cared about my career. And I think, when you only sell a single product and it's fairly transactional, even if the sales cycle is 6 months, it's really hard. And then, by the way, the great salespeople can build a relationship that quickly, but it's hard. And I think I really learned how to be, vulnerable and empathetic and, like, genuinely curious. And I think if you can be vulnerable, empathetic, and genuinely curious, that's how you build relationships with other human beings. And I think that was the beyond anything else, that's the number one skill I learned. I think I had that in my life, but understanding that still mattered in business, I learned that by starting my career where I did.
That's the gold. I have to double click into vulnerable, empathetic, and curious, because I am a very curious guy. In fact, that's why I have a podcast. So vulnerable, do you have, like, an example of vulnerability in action? I'm putting you on the spot, but just trying to dig in a little bit of, like, how. Yeah.
It's an easy one, man. Like, especially early in my career, if a customer asked me a question, I would tell them, like, dude, I don't know. I have no idea. Listen, I'm just getting started. I'm 2 years into this. You've been doing IT and infrastructure for 15 years. I don't know the answer to your question, but I promise you I will find out the answer, because I know that there's someone at my company that knows the answer to that question. So, like, being vulnerable and it's about really being honest about your personal situation. The other thing that's a great, like, sales example, but, like, a great personal example is I got sober as a salesperson, and I got sober while I was pretty established with like a lot of clients. I probably had like 30 or 40 clients that bought pretty much everything in their data center from me. And I was the good time guy, right? Like, hey, JR's coming out this week. We're going to go out to dinner. It's going to be a party. And then, like, when I stopped drinking in 2012, I still had those same customers. I'd go out to see them, and I'd be like, we'd go out still. And I would order, I'd be like, I'll just have a soda water. I'll just have a Sprite. And these guys would be like, what's going on, dude? And I'd tell them, like, listen, man, I'm allergic to alcohol. And they'd be like, oh, really? I'd be like, yeah, I break out in handcuffs. And they would laugh. And the people that knew me and saw me drink were like, that's probably a good idea, JR, right? Like, but just being honest about it. Like, hey, man, like, I got a problem and I got to stop, and I'm going to try to stop. And I just, hopefully you don't bust my chops too much about it. And, like, just being honest about who I am and where I'm at in my life, like, that immediately connects another person to you in a way that like, I don't think people really understand the power of that.
It's powerful. I actually gave up drinking over a year ago and have had to go through that same process because exactly how you put it, it just doesn't mix well with me, and I get into trouble. And it's funny because we have our company offsite in Vegas, and one of my engineers, Nichelle, and I had some wild times in the past. And he's like, Chris, come on, drink again. You were so fun. And I'm still fun without it. But so I really see myself in your story, and I appreciate your vulnerability and honesty. Such a good example. And, it's cool is that I had a guy, Ian Cognac. I don't know if you heard of him, but he's a good name in the States. He actually talked about the 12 steps in our interview of all things. I know that's been important to him, experiencing a life of true freedom. So great examples on vulnerability. Now I have to get into empathy. Just an example of what does that look like in the sales context?
I think it's about, like, I call it strategic empathy. Because what you have to do is you have to be able to put yourself truly in the shoes of the person you're talking to, right? I think especially young salespeople have a tendency to like really lean on their product expertise and like really understanding the bits and bytes and the speeds and feeds and like why their product is so much better than the competition and why it's the best solution. And it's like, you need to understand what that person cares about, because they don't care about some of the stuff that, like a great example on the speeds and feeds and the bits and bytes. Like if you're talking to a CIO, they don't care. Like they don't care. They care about the business outcomes. They care about, they're going to be in a board meeting in a quarter and they need to know, like, if they're going to make an investment with you, what are the business outcomes going to be? Whereas an administrator that's actually using your tool, they care about getting home at 5 p.m. so they can go to their kid's soccer practice. And if they don't buy your tool, they're going to get stuck dealing with issues for a longer time than they want to. So it's about understanding what your solution means to them. And the only way you can truly do that is by understanding what they care about. So that's when I talk about strategic empathy, I'm talking about like truly putting yourself in their shoes in consideration of their role, where they're from, what they care about, what they want to achieve. And those are things that you have to learn about by building a relationship with someone and really trying to understand who they are.
And of course, the final one to round out, the point you're making is curiosity. So just an example of what curiosity looks like in action, particularly in a sales context.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, maybe you have an inbound lead, right? And maybe you sell like a tool that helps with performance, application performance. And, you get on the call and they're like, yeah, we have bad application performance. That's why I took the demo. Like, show me your product. Young salespeople are like, all right, I'm going to show you my product. This is why it's awesome. Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, can you sign or whatever? Like, what's the next step? Who's involved in the deal? For me, it's like, whoa. Let's back up. Like, what do you mean you got, like, give me an example, right? Why does that matter? Like, who cares if there's application performance, right? Like, how does that affect your business? How does that affect you? What are the outcomes that, you guys can't achieve? Because it's really about like digging in. I call it the 5 whys. It's like, why you have application performance. Why does it matter? Like really, truly trying to get, it's like being a doctor, Chris. It's true diagnosis before prescribing, right? Like I'm going to prescribe a solution. That's my job as a sales person. I've never walked into the doctor's office and been like, I have a cough. And he's like, all right, take this pill. It's the best pill ever. Let me show you this PowerPoint about why this is the best pill ever and why this is better than all these other pills. Absolutely not. He asked me like 50 questions before he even thinks about prescribing a solution to me.
Yes.
That's how you have to approach sales. You have to be curious about what they're truly trying to solve for and what's causing it, and get to that root and understand that gap that they have, and then decide together if you can close the gap. That's what I mean by curiosity.
So I've got an appointment with Dr. Godfrey tomorrow, of all things, and he better ask me enough questions before jumping to a conclusion and making a prescription. Okay, so I see we have like 5 minutes left, and I wanted to ask you about Turbonomic. I wanted to ask you about being a CRO, but I also want to be respectful of your time, and I definitely want to talk more about Shift Group. We already understand the heart behind it, but a little more about the program. And, I know you teach tactics as well, right? So maybe let's really dig into that. And I just want to frame the opportunity for the audience to check it out. I already pinged it for Kyle, who's going to check it out in the comments here. So tell us about the, I don't know if you even call it a program or what it looks like in terms of how you help folks getting into tech sales.
So it's pretty straightforward. So we have it's like a software, it's a platform. It's two-sided platform. On one side, you got athletes and veterans that come in, and basically their experience is we start with self-discovery. So they start to learn a little bit about themselves, their vision, like how they're going to get there, what matters to them, like really tactical stuff. Like, where do you want to live? How much money do you want to make? Right? Because like nobody has that conversation with 23-year-olds anymore. Every 23-year-old gets out of school, says they want to make 300 grand, work remote, and work 30 hours a week. And for some reason, there's nobody being like, hey, dude, you can't do that. Like, sorry, right? So like we get real tactical on that type of stuff, but also really deep on their values and who they are as people. Then they do career discovery. So our biggest business is tech, but we place people in financial advisor roles, in medical device roles, in pharmaceutical roles. We place them in home services sales, which is like garage doors, roofs, windows, things like that. So they learn about these different careers. They pick a path. Then the next piece is showing them how to position their value and tell their story. Most athletes, most veterans don't have job experience, don't have internships, don't have job shadowing, but they have extreme value. So we teach them how to position that value, how to tell their story. And then we get into the tactical side. So if they choose B2B tech, we teach them how the sales process works, how the buying process works, how the team is structured. We give them a case study, and then they learn how to do account research, cold emails, cold calls, discovery. They learn sales tools, and they learn operational excellence. They have to do an assignment for each concept. And then on the other side of the platform is the company side. Companies can log in and they can watch a video of a former professional football player or a Navy SEAL or, a backup division quarterback do a cold call, present an account research assignment. It's like funnel for sales. Yeah, it's really, really cool.
And honestly, your candidates, given their background and their mentality, it is just such a natural transition to sales. So I am sure you're bringing in the best of the best talent. And I love how you give your students options. Because candidly, I've done tech sales for 10 years, and this channel is really focused on B2B tech sales, and I love it. But I also want to encourage the audience, maybe there's so many other things you can sell. Like I had a guy, the Copier Warrior that, Dale Dupree, I don't know if you heard of him, but he has a good presence on LinkedIn, and he sold coffee machines and made crazy money, right? So I love that you give options, and I love that you have a true coaching and training, and you have actual exercises that are being done, because sales is a performance art, as we've talked about. And I say this all the time, but you don't read about riding a bike, you get on and ride. And it's the same with this type of stuff. So, okay. Well, we only have a couple minutes. I just wanted to ask you like maybe one or two more questions.
Right.
In terms of like framing your story, I encourage folks to check out the actual, Shift Group program to go through it. But do you have just like a teaser tip or two on how to tell your story in a compelling way?
Yeah, absolutely. The way we think about it is, number one is that the key word is story, right? So it is a story. So you got to remember that. That means there's a hero. That means that there's an arc to the story. You've got to, and like going back to like, you've got to connect with your audience, right? Like these are all like, these aren't even really like job skills. These are more like storytelling skills that you have to be really good at this, right? So like when we think about like story structure, we think about story structure and elements. We think about identifying and then framing personal stories in a way that like you show that like, hey, I was here and I got here. And then you think about that ability as part of telling your story. You've got to be able to communicate your value and your objectives. So those are the things we teach. It's the power of storytelling, the power of connecting with your audience. We get into the details of what a good story, how it's structured, and what the elements are. We teach them how to identify and frame personal stories, and then we think about how to communicate your value and your objectives. That's the way we think about that part of our training.
Just another example of how thoughtful your approach is in your training, to be able to tell a compelling story in a very structured way while also embedding your value and your objectives. So, and going back to the vision example, that is everything. So the fact that your program addresses that along with actual exercises is huge. So we're on time. I appreciate you going a little over. I just wanted to finish up with, there are two quick questions. One is like your vision for the future with Shift Group. Where are you taking this thing?
We are going to be the de facto platform for athletes and veterans when it comes to career development. They're going to come to us to get their first job, second job, third job, and every job after that. And they're going to come to us to continue to get better at their job and in their career. And we're going to be the de facto platform. And that means any career, not just sales, any career. And we are going to be the de facto platform that companies come to when they want to hire an athlete or a veteran for any role. You want an accountant? You want an accountant who's a good teammate, who's resilient and coachable? You're going to call Shift Group. You want an HR person who's got all the right intangibles? You're going to call Shift Group. That's the vision. We're going to start in sales because sales is the hardest. So we're going to start there.
Hire.
Yes. 100%.
Dude, so it's basically sales for Shift Group is like what books were for Amazon. So very excited for you. Let's wrap up with a final call to action. I feel like it's after, like in one of my baseball games, my coach would get us fired up. Any final call to action before we sign off?
Yeah, I would say, number one most important rule in life is to have fun. That includes business, right? Like you got to make it fun. Figure out a way to make it fun. That's why we all love sports. That's why the people who serve in the military love the military, because they have fun doing it. So whatever you decide to do, find a way to have fun. That's the most important piece of advice I've ever gotten, and it's made a huge difference for me in my career.
JR, thank you so much for your time, your energy, and your insights. To the audience who showed up, we already, we have 6 people live that stayed through the whole thing, and this is going to float out in the YouTube sea, and a lot of eyeballs are going to be on it. Thank you for your time and attention. Guys, cheers to reaching our potential in tech sales and in life and having a lot of fun along the way, as JR said. All right, guys, appreciate it. Cheers.